Welcome. This is the podcast series dedicated to living a revenue culture. Long-term business survival is about creating maximum profit, and this can only be accomplished by creating a purpose-driven, people-first culture. That way, everybody wins. Twice per month, we do this podcast, and we bring in people who are out there in the real world doing this, working on this. And I don't think any of us got it perfect, but we're all trying to get better all the time. And so today we have Sarah Davis with us. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, Sarah's background is really ideal for being part of this podcast. Her career started as a financial analyst and then enterprise sales and account executive and director of enterprise business development. And then what we're going to talk a lot about today are the two companies that she's created, Transaction IQ, and most recently, Proven. So, Sarah, I welcome you here today, and I'm really excited to hear, because you're doing, particularly with Proven, you're doing some glass breaking, some really new stuff. So if you'd be, just you tell your story to us, but make sure you talk about Transaction IQ and how that got into purpose.
Yeah, so Traction IQ was really born from my experience in sales, where I was, well, I'll kind of give you let me rewind. I found my niche in sales of being someone who launched products into existing markets, or someone who launched new products someone who launched new products into existing markets. So I was hired by several companies to do that. And one of them being a company who hired me with the sole purpose of bringing a platform into the United States. And when I started doing that and opening up the doors of folks I knew and setting up meetings to get feedback, I was politely told over and over that these people would not buy the solution that I was hired to sell, which was not the easiest thing to take back to my leadership team and say, like, this is the work I've been doing, this is the feedback I've been getting, how would you like me to move forward? Because their feedback was, well, that's who we're going to sell it to. And I was like, okay. I'm not really sure that I'm going to be able to do this. So continue to try. And as a result of that, I felt really, I don't know what the right word might be here, but I felt really empowered to help other people not make those mistakes of hiring expensive salespeople as almost a Band-Aid for not doing some of the real in-depth market work up front. So I started on the side as I was working full-time for a startup. I started the first iteration of Traction IQ in 2018, helping companies to launch, gain traction, and understand, honestly, what it looks like for someone to even buy their solution. And that it's taken many different forms. So at first I, told people that I could teach them how to sell. I would be like, I can help you with your financial projections. And then all the while I'm trying to help them understand that what really matters is like listening to their market and getting in front of their market. So that was the first iteration of Traction IQ. And over the years, it's evolved to include helping folks, like I said, launch, gain traction, and then help them connect with investors. So helping them to really put those pieces in place that give investors the confidence that these companies have done the work and that they will get return on their investment.
When you help them with that, in our revenue game language, that's from the buyer's frame of reference backwards. You're understanding the market and what makes them successful, and even things the market doesn't know they need. If you understand them well enough, you can help lead them. Now,
absolutely.
When you take that to investors, do they get that, or do they just recognize these guys are better than the last guys and like it that way?
No, they get it. They absolutely get it. Yeah. Yeah.
And so how did that lead you to Proven?
So that's a great transition. So I realized about 2 years ago that the way that Traction IQ was built was, one, not going to be sustainable for me long term, just because of the amount of work and the time that it takes to get a company from where they are to where they want to be. It just wasn't making sense. And the services-based industry is completely unscalable. So I have been working with a partner for the last 8 months to really get down to the nitty-gritty of the services that we can provide at scale, and backed by technology. And Proven was born out of the concept of, I'm almost hesitant to say two-sided marketplace, but I guess for lack of better terms, is a two-sided marketplace between early stage companies and investors. And on the company side, we have created a customizable roadmap, which is a series of gates or milestones for a company to hit that will get them from one growth stage to the next. And so our ideal customer is a company from day one through Series A. And our ultimate goal is helping them find product market fit. And so these gates are layered again between funding rounds, and then also layered on top of that are our validation services, which is something I started doing several years ago at Traction IQ. And that includes accessing really hard to get information from a company's target market, and their customers. So there's two different layers of that: the market validation and the customer validation. So the Proven gates and then the market and the customer validation are what we offer right now. And that's for the companies. What that does in turn for the investors is it gives them, access to that hard to get information, to really understand a company's relationship to their target market, to their customers. It confirms product market fit, and more than anything, it helps them evaluate risk before they even get into due diligence, so that they can see right off bat, like, yeah, this company has done the work. I have confidence they've done the work. I can see the proof they've done the work, and they're growing based on what they've done.
Now, when you start with that step one, do your clients do they know the 4 steps? That do they already have a plan for it, or are you helping them see things they haven't seen before?
Both. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I would say more often than not, there's not really a plan in place. I mean, it is kind of the wild, wild west when you're starting a company, especially a startup. I think there is so many places that you can go for information that the noise can get very overwhelming. And then you listen and you're like, oh, that makes sense. But how does that actually apply to my business? And so what makes Proven different than a lot of that is, we help companies to be able to take what they're hearing and take what they know or they need to do and really apply it and create action around it for their own business.
And is part of the value you bring being objective?
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
And you and I have talked about this before, and you really have 2 clients in this scenario, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how does that work?
That's a good question, because up until recently, my clients have almost exclusively been the companies. So as a consultant, that was who I did the work for. That's who I did the work with. And then I help provide that to investors. But up until now, the investors have not technically been my client. So in an effort to drink my own Kool-Aid over the last 6-7 months, I have had consistent conversations with investors across the board to understand what they look for in a company that has achieved product market fit, and then backing that up to say, okay, based on what I've heard from angel investors, from institutional investors, from revenue-based financing teams, these are the things that I need to put in place for the companies I work with so that they can hit the goals that these organizations have set.
And did you learn some any new stuff when you went out and talked to all those investor groups?
Have I shared this with you?
No.
Okay, yes, I learned some really interesting things, and I'm still learning. I mean, last week I talked to an investor that's here local in Raleigh, and just got some incredible feedback from him. And honestly, sometimes it's a little sometimes the candor is a little like, oh, okay. Because when you hear, oh, this is great, you're on the right track over and over, and then someone's like, wait a second, have you thought about it like this? Like, I actually really, really, really appreciate and love those conversations. So yes, a lot of the things that have gone into how I have approached the new way of looking at Proven and how that will launch. One being the data that backs everything up. So within the market and the customer validation, previously I would do more of a qualitative approach to that research. And so one of the things that I do now is I do a qualitative and quantitative approach to it so that I can layer the data on top of each other and have like kind of a checks and balances system, creating a scorecard for the company and for investors to look at, both for the market and their customers. So that's one. Another thing that I learned really quickly and heard a lot was that investors are looking for people who can overcome objections, who can overcome things that have been difficult on their journey. So within Proven, within the gates that I mentioned, there's a two-step process for how you connect with your own customers and how you get feedback from them. And the first one is essentially like your own way of getting feedback for yourself, for your company. And then the second is essentially for you can share it with investors, because then it creates the story and it helps you to tell the story of, this is the feedback we got from our customers. We didn't necessarily love it. It wasn't the best feedback, or maybe it was, but here's how, this was something that was really hard for us to hear. And this is how we actually went about and changed it, and how we actually went about and solved the problem for our customers. So things like that I've been listening to that I've made sure are applied to not only myself as I'm building this, but the companies that they'll be part of it.
And you're building technology around this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And do you build those learnings into the technology?
So right now, as it exists, it's a much more manual process. So again, kind of in an effort to drink our own Kool-Aid, we have the deliverables that are available right now, the customer validation, the market validation, and the gates. They are backed by technology, but it's not our own proprietary system yet. Yeah. We're taking some time over the next couple months to just get ourselves really deep into those with some early stage customers, learn as much as we possibly can to then start development.
Very cool. And I'm gonna switch here a little bit. And one of the things we found that's really important in business, it's important from the standpoint of the end customer, and it's important from the standpoint of, can you build a team? And that's purpose.
Yeah.
And I'd like you to share your thinking about purpose with your clients. Mm-hmm. And then I'd also like you to tell me about your purpose in creating Proven.
Yeah. Ooh, okay. Because purpose is such an important part of the work that I do, that and every person I work with is so, it's something that they think about, like they have the thing that's driving them to build the solution, to build the company that they're building. Like, I work with the founders of companies. I don't work with like just employees who don't have a first degree connection. Like I work with like people who are not taking a paycheck yet, and they are sweating it out, and they are it's stressful. And so I think the purpose is so important, because that's what keeps your head in the game. Like that's what keeps driving you. And for me, my saying has been for a long time, my goal is to help people solve human problems. And so while, that might not be, my purpose isn't like necessarily like what somebody else is doing. My overall goal is to help them ultimately solve their problem, which is, finding their purpose and being true to their purpose and staying in that. So it's kind of a meta way to explain something.
No, that's very, and your work parallels ours exactly in that space. How, on your other client side, the investor side, do they look at purpose?
Oh yeah, I think so. And I always tell people, one of the things about working with investors is they have to be bought into the problem that you're solving. And so if you can really work with folks who have a personal experience with the solution that you're building, that's a great way to start when it comes to looking for investors.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Um, Now I'm going to switch direction again. This is one of my fascinations, I guess, is, and I started as an accountant, you started as a financial analyst. Um, I don't think enough businesses think about the fact they're there to transfer value,
Right.
and that value has to be, it's not just in its cool technology or it's pretty to look at, it has to accomplish something. And part of our job as sellers is to help the buyer preview the monetization of the value. Now, does that come up in your work, and how do you deal with it?
Well, so it has come up so much that I created the whole market validation solution because of it. So market validation is the process of talking. Well, first it's me understanding why a founder, why a CEO believes someone will pay for their solution, and then going and talking to these folks to confirm or not confirm, or find out where it sits in the middle of whether or not they will pay for it, how they're currently solving it. So yeah, not only does it come up, we've created a whole solution around it.
Interesting,
Mhm.
because I'm just always when I sit in meetings, I want to stand up and say, what's the value of us having this meeting, and what's the value of the outcome we just had,
Right.
and how does it transfer into the market so that it makes the market glad we're here?
Right. Absolutely. And I think, the most important thing you can always do in understanding that value, the value that you will transfer to your clients or your customers, is being curious and just asking them directly. Tell me what a solution looks like for you. Tell me how you're solving it. Tell me why this is painful. Tell me what it would mean to solve it in a different way. Or, gathering those insights is just so invaluable.
Yeah. I'm going to tie together now these last two parts, purpose and value.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of the people you're working with on the entrepreneurial side often probably start small as solopreneurs, and then they start to grow. How do they, or do they, combine their purpose and the value their purpose transfers into their employees, to their hiring and to their
Yeah.
onboarding and their growth?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can speak to this from both my own experience working for these types of companies as an employee and working with them on the other side as a consultant. I think that, oh gosh, when I was preparing, I was like, this is going to be a tough one to answer. I think that, I think that is really the purpose and the value that it brings to employees. Really makes a difference in how your employees manage their own priorities. So if your employees are feeling like they are, that they are part of something bigger than themselves, they are going to prioritize doing the work, putting in the steps that lead to generate more revenue, that lead to, if they feel, if there's a disconnect there, then it's going to affect everything. But I think I think that how you bring your purpose and your value into your company has an overall impact on how they manage their own priorities and what they bring to the business. And I think that is something that can be challenging to do. But I think that, there's so many things that have happened over the last 10 years really that make the workplace look different. And I think that listening to your employees, so maybe even applying how you connect with your customers to how you connect with your employees, brings a lot of value.
Yeah, and as I'm listening, one of the things we've identified is when you do what you just said, you build it around the purpose and the value. Change is easier to do because you may have to change something about your day, but you don't change where you're going and what you're trying to accomplish.
Right.
During the pandemic, I used to freak. I'd hear these people saying, well, we're going to pivot for a while. And, pivot means you're standing in the same place and the world is rushing by you. And now you got to try and figure out how to catch up. And companies that had purpose and knew the value that they were transferring, they might change something, but they didn't pivot and stand in one place. They just kept going.
They kept moving. Yeah, they kept moving forward. Absolutely. And their employees felt like they did too. When the world kind of felt like it stopped, their employees felt like they were moving forward in a positive direction instead of just panicking.
Yeah. And as you look back on the pandemic, the organizations, at least, I haven't read real research on this, but observational research, if you didn't have value you were transferring, if all you were was a transactional convenience, you had a bad time during the pandemic. But if you really were transferring value that people needed, they kept buying.
Right.
Maybe in a new way. Maybe you had to do delivery or you had to figure out how to do it virtually, but they still needed the value.
Absolutely. Yeah. And those companies thrived.
So we're going to switch directions again. Let's start to talk about the future.
Yeah.
And let's first talk about your business. Let's talk about how you see the next couple of years working out, and what you think the major opportunities or challenges will be going forward.
Ooh, okay. Well, something I think has been the writing on the wall, and we are seeing it really come to fruition right now, is how investors determine what is investable, what companies are worth investing and worth that time and that money. So I think that we're going to start seeing, and I'm hopefully going to be part of this big shift in investors challenging companies to have sets of data that they're providing ahead of time to show that this is the route, this is the route that we're on, this is how we plan to hit these goals. And so I think that that's one thing, because it is a little bit tougher right now to fundraise than it has been in the last several years. So having data that backs up and gives confidence around like what is fundable and what makes a company worth the investment. I think that's one thing. I think that, overall just the state of work has changed. And so I think, people working from home more has really sparked a lot of people to start their own companies, to feel more confident in, that inkling that they've had. It's like, I think this has legs. I think this has, I think I could start a business around it. And for everybody who's felt that, like, I hope that, I would love to work with them and help support in any way that I can. So I think that we're going to see a rise of people starting their own ventures, starting their own companies. And I think that we're going to see a lot more hard-pressed data coming from investors before they will make investments moving forward.
Now, when you talk about data, can you give us an example or two of what kind of data people should be collecting and investors want to see?
Oh man, there's quite a bit, but I think it depends on the stage where your company is first, and what you need to show. But if you are an early stage company, I think showing that you have put in the work or you've worked with somebody to do the work, like myself, like Proven, and you are able to back up the problem that you solve with feedback from your market. I think that's one data set that is just incredibly important. I think knowing your competitive advantage is incredibly important. I think being able to show the roadmap for how you plan to build, if you plan to build technology, what that looks like, how you go about doing it. And again, all of that comes from talking to your market and understanding the problem that you're solving in relationship to the people who have the problem and say they'll pay for the problem or pay for the solution. And I think the other step that's really important is feedback from customers. So not just that, you have customers, but how entrenched is your solution in your customers' workflows? And so basically saying, how hard would it be for them to get rid of it, both from we love using it because it's made our life so much easier to, yeah. So I think that those are two big ways, like really having data from your market, really having data from your customers, but then having data around your own business. Like I said, competitive advantage, just knowing your value proposition, understanding what it takes to, I could list off hundreds of things. I will not overwhelm anyone that listens to it by doing that, but I would say starting with your market and your customer.
It's interesting as you're talking about those. If I were a business and I knew those things, and you started out by talking about sometimes you get data you don't want to hear, but if I went after those three things alone, I would be much wiser about, what are my opportunities and what are my issues, and what do I have to do to really be successful?
Right. Absolutely.
Interesting. Now, I'm going to jump back and ask the same future question about culture. And, and you mentioned the people working from home. And, one of the things always about the culture of startups is the people who you need in the first year or two before you've got many customers or even any customers often aren't the same people you need in year 2 or year 3.
Right.
How do you build a culture of people first when the transitions that are going to come are going to make big changes?
Yeah, that is something that is, it's challenging. I know that from experience being an employee for startups and being a consultant for them. People who necessarily are your first salesperson might not, again, like you just said, 2 years down the line, be the right fit for how to scale into another market, or how to take it to the next level or level it up. And so I think that, I wish I had like the perfect solution for this. One of the things that we are trying to include improvement is actually a people layer as well, that helps with hiring and helps with understanding how to make strategic hires along the way. But I've seen it happen where, someone is 5 years into a startup and, they're not necessarily the right fit anymore. And that's just really challenging. So I'm not 100% sure how to answer that.
Well, I think just what you just said, that I'm not 100% sure, is the answer.
The answer, yeah.
And that transparency is really important. And once a long time ago, my company, we would be the outsourced sales teams for those first 2 years, because we knew that at first it was a different skill set in the first year or two. And secondly, we didn't want to be there after 2 years anyway. And so if you hired us, you'd be perfectly happy when we left in 2 years, and we'd be happy too. And then you could hire long-term salespeople.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that I always strive to do is to teach every CEO or founder that I work with how to be the best salesperson their company will ever have. Because if the CEO is not the best salesperson, they don't understand the whole big picture, then they're never going to be able to hire the right salespeople. They're never going to be able to pass that knowledge on. So I think, kind of to your point, that it's important when you're building a company to strategically put the right players around you, even if they aren't a full-time hire,
Yeah.
Having the folks around you that can build you up and support you, so that you can continue to do the work, to drive revenue and build.
Yep. Amen. Trends. Now, you talked a little bit about the change in trends in investing. What other trends do you see out there that, people who want to start new businesses, who've got that urge to do something important, what else should they know about?
Well, that's actually something I was going to bring up, is using non-full-time folks, contractors, to help you get to where you need to be early on. It's kind of a easy way to bootstrap, more affordable, and you just really never know who you're going to meet as well in that process that can add just a ton of value. That is a trend. I still think that remote work is going to continue to be a huge trend, which I'm super thankful for, that being a trend. When I started my career, it was just a couple of years before the 2008 market crash, and we kind of saw that coming. And so that was a really difficult time to be freshly out of college working. And then so now to kind of see things happening especially in technology companies, I think it's just going to continue to drive people to do their own things, where they're fed up with working for a larger company, or they're tired of feeling like they're just one part of a company, and they have an idea, or they have a dream to build their own solution for a problem that they see.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I see the same kinds of things. So, all right, last question for you. What advice do you have first for new people coming into the world, and whether they're new in going to work for the first company, or they're thinking, I don't even want to work for a company, I just want to do my thing and start right up. And then the same question, what advice do you have for the people who would hire those people? What should they be thinking about so that they both win?
Yeah, I mean, I had the desire to work for myself and to start a company really 5 or 6 years before I felt strongly enough about a problem to build the solution. And so I think that the first thing to do is acknowledge, just be honest with yourself about who you are. And if starting your own company someday is a goal, it's not really helpful to start a company without having any kind of direction, or feeling that like this is the right path for me. It's really, just keep doing what you're doing, keep learning. It will reveal itself to you. Like whatever you're supposed to be doing, it truly does like kind of smack you in the face one day, and you're like, okay, that's what I'm going to start working on. That's the direction I'm going to go. But I would say that, don't search for it. It will come to you. If that's the type of person you are, and you kind of put that out there, that's what you're looking for.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's one piece of advice. I think I mentioned this before, but staying curious. If you have questions, if you have an interest in a specific area or a specific topic, or just something that kind of keeps coming up to you, get to know, like lean into that, like keep learning as much as you possibly can. And I would say that the next thing, even if you're not an entrepreneur yet, but you have the desire to someday be an entrepreneur, surround yourself with entrepreneurs. Like get involved in, your local, whether it's a co-working space where you can just be kind of surrounded by those folks, or entrepreneurial programs or innovation labs, or whatever that looks like, to start kind of feeding off of that energy, because it will inspire you, and it is really powerful. So.
And how about for employers?
Yeah, for employers, I think this is kind of tricky, because I don't always feel, and I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, Rick, but I don't always feel like I was positioned in the right way to play to my strengths sometimes as an employee. And I think that sometimes when people have an entrepreneurial spirit, they can rub people the wrong way. I don't know how to say that in a nicer way. But they can ruffle feathers, or they can like maybe ask too many questions, and that can be a little like, okay, so where do we put the people who are just naturally curious? How do we use that to our own advantage?
Yeah.
Well, so if you're an employer and you have employees that kind of fit that mold, and you know they have an entrepreneurial spirit, use them to help your company break into new markets, use them to be in sales, use them, and kind of keep pushing them in new directions, because that it's such a cool thing to be able to help companies grow. And if you can empower the people that you've got internally to be able to help do that for you, like you're gonna have long lasting, loyal employees that really love their job.
I wasn't expecting this part of the conversation, but one of our earliest podcasts was a friend of mine, a lady by the name of Susan Foley.
Mhm.
And Susan is one of the really global leaders in entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
which is the kind of the entrepreneur inside the organization.
Mhm.
And, the way you describe that, that you got to market by helping big companies figure out how to, because entrepreneuring hasn't been terribly successful. Everybody knows it's important, but, so you may find there's big companies that want you to come in and help them figure out how to do that inside.
That sounds fun. I would love to.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
So, Sarah, this has been great. And it's been educational, it's been fun, it's been interesting. So is there anything you'd like to leave us with beyond what you've already said?
I will say it one more time, but stay curious always. Keep challenging yourself, keep pushing yourself to learn more about the things that interest you, because you really never know where it's going to lead.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much. And for the rest of you, enjoy this podcast, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks.